We have our own mental imagery on what causes one to fall into the spell of addiction. Being besotted by a constant craving for nicotine. Becoming lured towards the potentiality of an unopened bottle. And going to any lengths to maintain the habit. If we think about it though, could there be more about being an addict other than the helpless figure that it portrays? This video will investigate the multiple perspectives of how addiction engulfs us, to then allow us to ponder how to see others in addiction, or even how you see yourself. The Mind Life channel talks about all of the things that tinkers our thoughts to untangle your mind, allowing yourself a richer and deeper perspective into life. Subscribe to the channel and also look out for my library of videos under the Mind Philosophy brand, and now rebranded to Mind Life. Put simply, addiction can be defined as a habit that yearns for reinforcement, where a physical and psychological dependence is built to not just to repeat the habit, but to replicate its discovered nirvana, taking whatever means necessary to achieve it again and again. It's a chronic and compulsive catchment of ourselves that we are drawn to which we see no end. To account for such behaviour, there are numerous models that various theorists over time have attributed towards addiction. An example of 3 of these models include the biological, the psychological, and the social model. The biological model sees an addict as one who is sick, has a chronic disease and no control over their habit, or perhaps genetically entwined from an addictive parent. Such a person would require treatment, yet can never be cured, as their only path towards normality is through complete abstinence. There is a psychological model where addiction is caused by an emotional disturbance, such as a traumatic childhood, an underlying anxiety, or perhaps an aspect of our personality that draws us into a drought of expression. Then there is a social model where there is a shift of emphasis away from who we are within to what we experience through others and our environment. It comes from the influence of our culture, peer pressures to conform, as well as our family surroundings, as our exposure to substances will only increase our chances of being brought into them. So to summarise, we have discussed 3 model examples of how we are brought towards addiction. The biological model, where addiction is born of our genetics and our bodily reactions towards substances. The psychological model, where addiction is brought from an emotional disorder, a portion of our poignant personality that drifts us towards substances for the recognition that we yearn. Then there was a social model from the influence of our culture, peers, and environment. And while over time these models have stood in their own right, what if though we look at these holistically, as there cannot be just one factor that explains all of our obsessive addictive behaviours, but a combination of all. This is known as the Biopsychosocial Model. This model considers our genetics, physiology, psychological and social factors to perhaps allow an individual atonement. In other words, understanding addiction through a lens from what makes us human. We may think we know what it is like to be human, but if we knew what it feels like, we could always explain our blissful peaks and our ominous lows. And yet, when it comes to addiction, well, most of us tend to get through our daily lives without falling into a well of compulsion. We are among an age of economic uncertainty, spiralling technology, an insatiable appetite for instant gratification. It's only inevitable that at times we will experience a gap. And this gap is where we look for things to soothe us, the instant spur that rushes our blood, tantalises our tongues, and mellows our troubled minds. Addiction is not something that is reserved for the few, as a line between what is deemed mild and for the many is becoming forever so fine. Where no matter for its reasons, as long as temptation is held within the feel of our fingers, as for as long as we have hands, it will always be in our grasp. Addiction shows us there is always a silent, sultry spirit in all of us, as for whom we deem as invulnerable, and now no less a human than ourselves.